family, listen to me. This moment right here is not an accident. You didn't stumble into this room. You didn't click on this message by chance. And you didn't survive everything you've been through just to blend in. God has been weaving threads you couldn't see, aligning steps you didn't understand, and covering you in ways you didn't even recognize. You thought it was coincidence, but heaven has been calling your name long before you ever knew you were chosen. There's a reason your spirit has been restless. There's a reason doors that weren't supposed to open suddenly cracked for you. There's a reason you keep getting back up when everything around you tried to break you. Baby, God chose you, not because you were perfect, not because you had it all together, but because he saw purpose in you that no storm could cancel and no darkness could steal. So lean in, pay attention, because what God is about to reveal in your life will make every confusing season make sense. This is not a coincidence. This is confirmation. You were divinely chosen long before you understood your calling. And when you really let that truth settle into your spirit, everything about how you see your life begins to shift. Most people spend their entire lives trying to validate their worth, trying to earn acceptance, trying to prove why they deserve a seat at the table. But when you understand that God chose you before you ever took your first breath, you stop living like a beggar and start walking like someone backed by heaven. There's a different kind of posture that comes from knowing you are chosen. It's not arrogance, it's assurance. It's not pride, it's purpose. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows that even in the seasons where they felt overlooked, unseen, or forgotten, God's eyes were on them the entire time. Before you knew how to spell your own name, God had already whispered it in eternity. Before you ever dreamed your first dream, God had already placed gifts inside you that would one day be necessary for the kingdom. And the wildest part is, you didn't have to qualify for it. You didn't have to impress him. You didn't have to come from the right family, the right background, the right city, or the right side of anybody's opinion. God didn't look at your resume. He looked at your destiny. He saw something in you that was worth choosing, worth cultivating, worth developing, worth fighting for, and worth maturing, even when you didn't see it in yourself. When you think about being chosen by God, you might imagine something glamorous, something shiny, something that comes with applause and spotlight. But the truth is, most callings look ordinary before they look divine. Most chosen people feel unprepared before they feel anointed. Moses didn't feel chosen when he was stuttering in the wilderness. David didn't feel chosen when his own father forgot to call him in from the field. Esther didn't feel chosen when she hid her identity in fear. And you didn't feel chosen when you were walking through seasons that looked nothing like your potential. But the beauty of being chosen is that it doesn't depend on how you feel. It depends on God's decision. And once God chooses you, no one can unchoose you. Not your past, not your insecurities, not your mistakes, not the people who misunderstood you, and not the enemy who tried to convince you that you weren't enough. When God chooses you, he starts preparing you in ways you don't always recognize. Sometimes the preparation looks like pressure. Sometimes it looks like isolation. Sometimes it looks like doors closing, relationships shifting, opportunities disappearing, and plans falling apart. Not because God is punishing you, but because he is pruning you. A chosen life comes with a divine kind of shaping. You're not just being developed, you're being destined. You're not just being refined, you're being aligned. Every season that confused you is actually molding you. Every moment that felt unfair was strengthening something in you that would one day carry what God placed on your life. Being chosen doesn't mean you'll be comfortable. In fact, some of the most uncomfortable seasons were the clearest signs that God was working. Think about all the times you tried to fit in and it just didn't feel right. Think about the moments you tried to dim yourself just to blend in, but something in you wouldn't let you shrink too far. Think about the opportunities you wanted so badly, but God blocked, not because you weren't capable, but because you were called somewhere higher. A chosen person will often feel out of place in environments that weren't built to hold them. And sometimes you misinterpret that discomfort as rejection, when really it was divine redirection. God was pulling you out of places that would have buried you to position you in places that will build you. There were seasons when you questioned why certain people walked away, why certain chapters closed, why certain prayers didn't get the answers you expected, why certain things you thought were stable suddenly collapsed. But when you're chosen, God will intervene even when you don't realize He's intervening. He will interrupt cycles that you were never meant to stay in. He will frustrate plans that were beneath your purpose. He will stir a holy discontent inside you so you stop settling for what's convenient and start pursuing what's divine, because chosen people cannot remain in places that shrink their calling. You may have thought those losses were random, but they were intentional. You may have thought those disappointments were coincidences, but they were protection. You may have thought those delays were setbacks, but they were preparation for something far greater than what you were reaching for. And then there's the internal part of being chosen, the part nobody sees, the private warfare, the inner battles, the silent questioning. Chosen people often struggle the most with believing they're worthy of the calling placed on their life. They wrestle with fear, insecurity, comparison, and the lies the enemy whispers when no one else is around. Not because they're weak, but because they're targeted. A chosen person carries influence even before they step into it. The enemy sees your potential long before you recognize it. That's why he fought your childhood. That's why he fought your identity. That's why he fought your mental health. That's why he fought your relationships. That's why he fought your confidence. He wasn't fighting who you were, he was fighting who you were becoming. Heaven has been investing in you since the beginning, and hell has been trying to interrupt that investment. But the beautiful thing about being chosen is that no attack can cancel God's assignment. You may have gone through seasons that bruised you, but they didn't break you. You may have walked through valleys that scared you, but they didn't stop you. You may have gone through storms that shook you, but they didn't sink you. Because chosen people are preserved. Even when life knocked you off your feet, something in you refused to stay down. Even when you were overwhelmed, something in you kept pushing. Even when you didn't know where you were going, something in you kept moving. That something wasn't random. It was the evidence that God had placed His hand on your life. When God chooses someone, He also equips them, not always with the things they prayed for, but with the things they need. Strength you didn't know you had, wisdom that came from hard lessons, discernment sharpened by disappointment, compassion shaped by pain, patience cultivated through waiting, endurance developed through trials. These are not coincidences. They are qualities forged in a chosen person's journey. God has been preparing you to carry an assignment that requires a maturity you could only gain through experience. Every time you wondered why you had to go through so much, it was because of what God placed on your life. Chosen people often live lives that feel heavier because their purpose carries weight. You may think you're ordinary, but the calling on your life is extraordinary. You may think you're overlooked, but heaven has been spotlighting you all along. You may think you're late, but God has been aligning the right moments at the right time. Every season that felt like silence was actually God working behind the scenes, arranging details, shifting atmospheres, moving people, and preparing opportunities. Being chosen means your story is orchestrated. Nothing about your journey is accidental. Not the pain, not the victories, not the setbacks, not the breakthroughs, not the delays, not the open doors, not the closed ones. When God chooses you, every moment becomes a thread in a larger tapestry that is still being woven. And there comes a moment in every chosen person's life when they begin to sense that something is shifting. They can't explain it, but they feel it. A stirring, a pulling, a stretching, a divine restlessness. You start to feel like you're outgrowing old versions of yourself. You start to feel like you were made for something more. You start to notice that things you tolerated before no longer fit. You start sensing that God is calling you higher, deeper, further. This is the awakening of someone who was chosen long before they understood their calling. It's God reminding you of what he decided about you before you even knew yourself. And the powerful part is being chosen doesn't always make life easier, but it does make life purposeful. You don't walk through things for no reason. You don't survive things by accident. You don't encounter certain people without divine intention. God chooses with strategy. He chooses with foresight. He chooses with perfect timing. And he chose you knowing every chapter of your story, including the ones you wish you could erase. Yet he still called you, still anointed you, still assigned you, still believed in what he placed inside you. You weren't chosen when you got strong. You were chosen when you were weak. You weren't chosen when you had it together. You were chosen when you were still learning who you were. You weren't chosen when you became confident. You were chosen when you were still questioning everything. God doesn't choose who looks ready. He chooses who he is ready to transform. And he has been transforming you, guiding you, molding you, even through seasons you thought were breaking you. When you finally embraced the truth that you were divinely chosen long before you ever understood your calling, you stop living from fear and start living from faith. You stop reacting to life and start aligning with purpose. You stop doubting who you are and start discovering who you were created to be. You begin to realize that every step you've taken was leading you into something God prepared for you before the foundation of the world. Every closed door and detour was God's intentional shaping, not coincidence. And when you begin to recognize that truth, your entire understanding of your story shifts. We grow up believing that progress is supposed to be linear, that success should follow a neat timeline, that opportunities should come when we feel ready. But God is not bound by human expectations or predictable patterns. God writes in curves, not straight lines. He leads through valleys before mountains, through wilderness before purpose, through confusion before clarity. And because of that, the moments you labeled as setbacks were often the very moments God was using to strengthen, redirect, and refine you. Closed doors aren't punishments when you belong to God. They're protections. Detours aren't delays. They're divine alignments. What looked like chaos was actually choreography, heaven moving pieces in ways you didn't understand yet. Think back to the doors you begged God to open, the opportunities you thought were perfect, the relationships you believed would last forever, the plans you were so sure would work. You prayed, you pushed, you positioned yourself, and still the door refused to move. And at the time, you thought God was ignoring you or withholding something good from you. But now, when you look back, you can see that what you wanted would have broken you, drained you, distracted you, or delayed you. It wasn't rejection, it was redirection. God saw the trap before you saw the attraction. God saw the burden before you saw the blessing. God saw the spiritual weight before you felt the emotional excitement. And in his mercy, he said no, not to punish you, but to protect your future. And there are times when God will close doors you had the key for. Doors you had the skill for, doors you had the faith for, doors you thought were meant for you because everything looked right on the outside. But God isn't moved by how something looks. He's moved by how it aligns with your purpose. He knows what your spirit can carry and what it can't. He knows what environments will nurture your calling and which ones will suffocate it. He knows who is meant to walk with you and who is not equipped for where you're going. And because God loves you too much to let your destiny slip into the wrong hands, he will shut doors with a force that leaves no room for negotiation. What felt like loss was actually deliverance disguised as disappointment. And then there are the detours, the seasons where God rerouted your entire life in a direction you never planned for. Maybe your career shifted. Maybe a relationship ended. Maybe a dream crumbled. Maybe your environment changed overnight. Maybe you had to start over, rebuild, or relocate. Detours feel painful because they interrupt the story we thought we were writing. But purpose isn't built on your plan. It's built on God's design. Sometimes God will disrupt your comfort to deliver you into calling. Sometimes he will separate you from what you wanted so he can connect you to what you were created for. Sometimes he will remove you from places you were willing to settle in because settling is too small for someone chosen by him. You may not have realized it at the time, but certain seasons had to collapse because you were outgrowing them. God saw your future and realized the environment you were in couldn't hold the next version of you, so he allowed detours to stretch your capacity, build your resilience, deepen your faith, and sharpen your discernment. Detours are not random. They are classrooms. They are the places where you learn who you are, who God is, and what you are capable of surviving. They are the spaces where God reveals strengths you didn't know you possessed and weaknesses he intends to heal. You think you were lost, but God knew exactly where he was taking you. Consider the moments when you felt stuck, paused, or left behind. Everyone else seemed to be moving forward while you were forced to wait, to be still, to be patient. You didn't realize that God was slowing you down because what was ahead of you wasn't ready yet. Or maybe you weren't ready for it. Sometimes God will place you in divine waiting seasons to protect you from premature exposure. A blessing released too early becomes a burden. An assignment stepped into too soon becomes overwhelming. A relationship entered without healing becomes a cycle of pain. God doesn't delay to punish you. He delays to prepare you. Every time you cried out, God, why this path? You didn't know that the detour was keeping you from walking into something harmful. Every time you wondered, why couldn't it work out? You didn't see the future heartbreak God was blocking. Every time you questioned, why does my progress feel slow? You didn't recognize that God was strengthening your foundation so it wouldn't crack under the weight of the calling that was coming. Closed doors felt final, but they were actually transitional. Detours felt confusing, but they were directional. God was guiding you away from what was beneath you and toward what was destined for you. Sometimes you don't realize a door was harmful until years later you look back and say, thank God that didn't work out. Sometimes you don't understand a detour until hindsight gives you revelation. You see how